helping you own a piece of the rock. We're revitalizing communities and preserving our environment. We're making an impact. See the difference. Feel the difference. Building a better Jamaica for you and me.
You can feel it. Make JC.
Join the conversation focusing on Jamaica's development. Tune in to the post-cabinet press briefings. Wednesdays live at 9 a.m. with a rebroadcast at 9 p.m. right here on PBCJ, the People's Station.
Denise Williams here, inviting you to join us on Financially Focused, the ultimate destination for go-getters who are ready to take the step-by-step actions to master your finances and create a family legacy. Tune in, watch, take notes, and participate to discover the strategies of
Here's conservation lessons from Jamaica's recent loss. And this is more than a conversation around wildlife. It's a moment of reflection and responsibility as we come to discuss after the harrowing discovery of 10 dead crocodiles discovered on Earth Day, April 22. Now, today we explore the science, policy, and passion behind crocodile conservation in Jamaica. And our speakers today represent organizations on the front lines of conservation, from government agencies to grassroots advocates. And they will help us unpack what went wrong, what are the lessons that we must learn, and how we can act to protect one of Jamaica's most iconic and often misunderstood species. Now, without further ado, we will proceed into the discussion and start with our first presenter for this afternoon, Ms. Treya Picking, who will present on Saving Jamaica's Crocodiles, Innovative Research and Outreach for Conservation. But just a little bit about Treya. Treya is a wildlife conservation biologist based in Jamaica with extensive experience in research, wildlife management, and community outreach. She's a graduate of the University of Kent with a Bachelor of Science, in Wildlife Conservation, and she returned to Jamaica to champion national efforts in fauna protection. She has spent 6 years at the National Environment and Planning Agency, NEPA, where she led conservation initiatives, including Jamaica's first island-wide assessment of the American crocodile, a 2-year research project in collaboration with NEPA, UWI, and the University of Florida Crop Ducks, forming part of her MPhil studies completed in 2024. Treya now leads the Jam Croc initiative, especially if you've been active on social media, which is formerly the Croc Conservation Jamaica, which she founded to promote safe coexistence between people, crocodiles, and wetlands. She also works with Rewild, supporting conservation projects in Jamaica and across the Caribbean. Driven by a passion for protecting Jamaica's biodiversity, Treya aims to establish a national wildlife nonprofit to advance awareness and conservation of Jamaica's understudied species. I know we're tuning in virtually, but please make Treya welcome. Let's see the comments in the chat and so on. Over to you, Treya.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Let me just set up my screen. So yes, thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I am going to be talking a bit about our crocodiles here in Jamaica, some research that we've been getting up to these past few years, and a bit of conservation that we're doing island-wide, which includes outreach. So just a bit about our crocodiles. They are the most widely distributed of the New World crocodiles. A lot of people ask why they called the American crocodile. Well, the 18 countries in which they're naturally found in occur across this region. So you could say they're the crocodiles of the Americas region. And their IUCN or their international status is vulnerable, but they do range from highly endangered to recovered in the different countries that they are found in. Now, in terms of right here in Jamaica, it is our island's largest native reptile and the only crocodilian species we have here. We do not have alligators. We do not have any other type of crocodile, just the American crocodile. So they are typically shy and reclusive. The crocodiles we typically see in the media, like the saltwater crocodiles found in Southeast Asia and parts of Australia, and the Nile crocodiles, which are a bit more on the aggressive side, typically portray crocodiles, but our crocodiles are not like this at all. Now, populations were considered abundant up until the early 1960s, and then they started to drastically decline because of hunting and also the mass removal from their habitats to commercial exhibits, primarily in the United States. Now, in response to this decline, they were placed on both international and national laws, which our colleague Ricardo Miller will get into later. And the National Environment and Planning Agency is the entity that mandates all the laws regarding the crocodile. And so they do spearhead the management and conservation of this species. Now, our island seems pretty big, crocodiles seem pretty widespread, but when we actually look at the map, only a small portion of the island provides habitat for our crocodiles. They're primarily found along the south coast with small isolated populations along the north coast. Now, we actually have records of crocodiles being found in every single parish. Even in St. Anne, up until the other day, we didn't have an official record, although we knew that they were around. And then there was an incident where someone had encountered a crocodile back in 2023. But when we look at the distribution of our crocodiles, they've been here way before humans arrived in Jamaica. And so their population was probably quite widespread. And the habitat is shrinking due to our anthropogenic impacts, where we are developing and encroaching more and more into their wetlands. And so their habitat is shrinking. Now, the natural wetlands they're found in can be rivers, coastal lagoons, mangrove swamps, and they're also found in artificial wetlands such as sewage ponds, fish ponds, and canals. And they do use the sea to travel between their various wetland habitats. Now, the biggest threats and challenges that our crocodiles face, the biggest one is just our attitude towards them. There is an ingrained fear towards reptiles and amphibians in our culture, unfortunately. People are, afraid of the little lizards on the wall. And so imagine a huge, giant lizard, crocodile, being at their front door. The fear is very much real. But a lot of the time, there's a lot of fear because there's a lot of misconceptions with the species behavior. And as I had mentioned earlier, what we call would rather run than rush you. They are typically quite shy and docile. Now, the other issue we have is illegal hunting, and this is one of the biggest threats facing the population. It started in the early 2000s, where we started to come across crocodiles with their tail missing, and we came to find out that the black market for their tail meat is fueled by the myth of it being an aphrodisiac. And this is something that we're trying to tackle, and it's extremely hard. Of course, the other threat is habitat loss and fragmentation, and also pollution. As humans, as a growing population, we're encroaching further into their wetland habitats, and unfortunately, crocodiles are having to learn to adapt to the fragmented landscapes in which they have to exist and coexist with us. The other issues are such as harassment and feeding. We say, feeding a fed croc is a dead croc. When you feed a croc, they lose their natural fear instinct that they have towards us as humans. And so when they start to see you, they start to approach instead of flee. And it could lead to negative interactions such as an attack. It can also make them more vulnerable to illegal hunters. So this is something that we're always telling the public: do not feed a crocodile, even if you're trying to be its friend. The best thing you can do is admire it from a safe distance and look out for it. We also have issues with illegal captures. These videos are always going viral on social media, and a lot of the times the crocodile will be caught when it doesn't need to be. If it's just simply left alone, then it will move out of, say, the canal that's within this community within a few hours. People also get hurt. Crocodiles also get hurt. We've had cases of crocodiles getting really bad spinal injuries and also dying, and people getting bitten on the hand and losing limbs because they are not trained to handle crocodiles. And then we also have issues with people keeping crocodiles as pets. Yes, we do find people keeping them in bathtubs, which is also very illegal. And then we also have wildlife vehicle collisions. Our roadways cut in between swamps, and unfortunately, when crocodiles are trying to cross the road, we can have vehicles running into them. So what are we doing as an island to protect and manage the crocodile population? Well, we have ongoing public education and outreach efforts, wildlife response, research, and enforcement. And really, none of this can happen without the capacity that we have. It's a very collaborative approach that we have to respond to crocodile situations around the island. We have various government entities. Of course, NEPA is the one who spearheads and manages and is kind of at the top overseeing all the responses that happen. And then we have entities like the Holland Bay Crocodile Sanctuary, Hope Zoo, the Caribbean Coastal Area Management Foundation, CCAM, which patrol the Portland Bight Protected Area. We have the Urban Development Corporation. We have game wardens. We even have a game warden community group based in Treasure Beach. We also have my project called the Jam Croc Initiative, and we just have amazing citizens. And we also work closely with JDF and Jamaican Constabulary Force when needed. Now, the innovative research that I was going to touch on was what was mentioned in the introduction, where I spearheaded the first island-wide crocodile survey. I could talk about this all day and all night, but I won't go into too many details with the time. But basically, it was a collaborative project while I was at the National Environment and Planning Agency. I spearheaded this project, which was a collaborative project with NEPA, UE and the University of Florida Croc Docs, and funding came from all three entities as well as the Jamaica Conservation Partners to make this project possible. It lasted for 2 years, and we did this project to determine the species conservation status. It's very critical to know what's going on with a wildlife population or with a species in order to prioritize like conservation priorities going forward, especially with all the threats we were seeing with our crocodiles. We just really didn't know how they were doing. And a lot of anecdotal evidence was showing a decline in certain areas. We had a lot of people who had been working with crocodiles from the older generations that were just seeing smaller and smaller numbers right in front of their very eyes. So there was a lot of panic and there was a lot of worry, especially with the illegal hunting issue and the habitat loss. And so we did this to determine its population, the population density, distribution, size class structure, and nesting activity, as well as looking at habitats, looking at historical and current data to pinpoint the areas where crocodiles are found, the type of areas that they're found in, and the most important habitats that we should prioritize for strict protection. So those would be a lot of our wetlands along the South Coast. Now, we surveyed 7 parishes in total. This was 6 parishes along the South Coast and 1 along the North Coast, which was Trelawney. There were 35 survey sites in total. We surveyed most of them 4 times. It would be during the wet and dry season over a period of 2 years. And we included all types of wetland habitats from natural to artificial. Now, what we found was very, very interesting. Just to kind of summarize based on what I'll be talking about next, we found that crocodiles are found across their historical range, but we did, which is mainly along the South Coast with small scattered populations along the North Coast. But we could see where threats such as illegal hunting were possibly causing a decline in certain areas. And then we also found that artificial habitats, which are our sewage ponds, fish ponds, and canals, tended to have higher densities of crocodiles than natural habitats, which was quite alarming. We also found that the parish of St. Catherine had significantly higher population densities. So the number of crocodiles in this parish was significantly higher than other parishes. And also that sewage ponds, mangrove swamps, and rivers supported the highest population counts. We also saw that the population was mainly quite young. We were counting a lot of juveniles and hatchlings, which is not a bad thing. It does show that, illegal hunting is mainly targeting the older animals, which is worrying. But it does also show that there's still successful nesting and recruitment. And so the population is still, or can still recover from its current status. And what was also interesting is we saw successful nesting across natural and artificial landscapes. But what our results really told us is that it just demonstrates how resilient American crocodiles can be in a changing environment, where we were just seeing how they are adapting to everything and still being able to just thrive in certain habitats which you would think they wouldn't be able to exist. But with that being said, kind of leads to the whole discussion of sewage ponds. That was in the spotlight the other day. A lot of people had a lot of questions. This is another topic I could also talk about all day. But from the sites, the top 5 sites with the highest population, so the 5 sites with the highest population counts from the study were all in St. Catherine. 3 out of the 5 were sewage ponds. We have Soapberry, Greater Portmore, and Hillshire sewage ponds. We also found, when you really look at the map on this screen, you can see that there is a very diverse wetland network, and it supported all crocodile life stages, from nesting to recruitment to breeding adults, which was pretty cool. Now, just a bit of history on Portmore. It was built on reclaimed swamp back in the 1960s, and we found that over time, crocodiles adapted to all the land use changes by using the intricate canal systems to travel between the sewage ponds and the surrounding natural wetlands, such as the Flashes, Great Salt Pond, and also the coastline and other mangrove swamps. Now, the thing is, if crocodiles lose their preferred habitat, they will turn to artificial wetlands like these for refuge. And I have a few theories as to why they may be moving more and more into these artificial wetlands. They feel safe. They act like a safe haven. People don't really trouble them in these habitats. We don't really observe illegal hunting in these habitats, which is good. It's also shelter from wind and storm surges, and there is kind of a food source. You may find a lot of wading birds and fish in these sewage ponds, and it provides good nesting habitat, and it is technically a fresh water source, which is really good for the hatchlings, which need that in order to survive during more or less their first year before their salt glands are developed. So NEPA has been serving these ponds for nearly a decade now, and between 2019 and 2022, the East ponds underwent a rehabilitation process where they relined the ponds, redid them. And we, throughout the whole of that period, were monitoring, seeing how the crocodiles were doing. We had to rescue crocodiles sometimes when the water levels were dropped and the ponds became empty and they couldn't climb out because of the non-grip geotextile fabric. And once the ponds were filled and completed, we saw in a flash how the crocodiles just recolonized these ponds. So they still liked them. They were still preferring them. And that was when we were like, okay, everything's good. The ponds are filled back up. Crocodiles can move in and out, until obviously what happened the other day, unfortunately. And in terms of crocodiles living in artificial wetlands, it's not just happening in Jamaica, it's happening all around the world. And it's also happening with other wildlife, as us humans are replacing these natural wetlands or natural habitats with anthropogenic landscapes. So a lot of people ask, what are the implications? What about crocodile health, which Joey is going to touch on in his presentation? What about humans? If they're moving closer into urban landscapes and it's happening more and more, what does that mean for human crocodile interactions? Well, it just means we need to step up management and outreach and other initiatives to ensure the safe coexistence. And so we definitely need to do further research on a lot of these questions that we have about this new phenomenon. And, my approach is, if we take away their habitat, the least we can do is find a way to accommodate them and to coexist. And kind of in this case, we may not have a choice, because I'm going to give you an example of Soapberry, which is the other sewage pond, which you saw on the previous slide, which was to the kind of north of the map. Now, Soapberry, as you can see from that aerial view, is literally smack in the middle of a large wetland network. You have the Rio Cobre that runs alongside that sewage pond. You have mangrove swamps surrounding that sewage pond as well. And the Rio Cobre then runs into Hunts Bay, which is another crocodile habitat, which then runs into the sea, which is another habitat. And it's right next to Portmore, which is, of course, is another habitat. So all of that coastline is prime crocodile habitat. So this sewage pond facility also replaced a huge chunk of natural wetland. Now, what this facility did, which was a bit different from Greater Portmore, is they actually built a sturdy chain link fence around the perimeter, which is very costly. It is. But unfortunately, wetlands, well, not unfortunately, but wetlands will always find a way to reclaim back their space because you have the changing water levels, and these fences over time will erode if they're not maintained. And so this happened at Soapberry. Over time, the crocodiles burrowed underneath. People also were cutting the fence to move in and out. And wildlife, it became an ecosystem within itself. So you find crocodiles there, you find a lot of bird species, you find land crabs, you find insects, bats, you name it. It's a really, really cool ecosystem within itself. Now, we also do surveys at this site. We work closely with the staff. We talk with them. They actually like the crocs being around. We best practices in working in this crocodile space, which is the best approach going forward. But management still has its concerns. The ultimate thing, the ideal scenario for them would be for the crocodiles to be removed, but they can't simply be removed. First of all, it's a safety hazard for us to remove them from sewage ponds, so we have to take that into account. But it also doesn't make much sense. You'd put a lot of manpower, time, effort, money to try and remove what we count like over 20 crocodiles each time across these 8 large ponds. And we would remove all of them for them just to move back in days later, because the fence is still going to erode. It's going to be very hard to maintain a strict boundary. And so maybe there's a way to exclude crocodiles from wetlands, but it's going to take a lot of investment. It's going to take an innovative approach. And we have to, moving forward, as our population grows and more of these facilities are going to be built probably in these wetland areas, we have to come up with a solution that works in favor or balances the environment with development. So I'm just going to talk a bit about the JamProc initiative quickly, which is a project I recently, well, it started off as an Instagram page back in 2018 to raise awareness and highlight conservation activities around the island, which was well needed. And it was formerly known as Croc Conservation Jamaica. It received funding last year for the first time from a USAID combating wildlife trafficking project of the Caribbean, and it supported activities that we carried out, monitoring, outreach, and enforcement. We had a formal partnership with NEPA, and we also partnered with other entities such as Hope Zoo, Holland Bay Sanctuary, communities, and game wardens to basically keep up the crocodile conservation momentum with the efforts that were taking place. So some achievements were just continuing to monitor crocodile habitat, the population. We want to collect more and more data so we can start to even get better ideas of the numbers in certain areas and if they're declining, if they're increasing, how they're doing. We worked with a lot of people on it. Worked with a lot. The next thing we did was to actually create updated educational material, which is well needed. And this educational material will set the foundation for outreach initiatives in the future. So I worked with a local graphic artist called Rory Atkinson to create an infographic, a pamphlet, and a poster, and also worked with a young artist and environmentalist who created this amazing crocodile life cycle diagram. It was shared and reviewed by project partners and the Endangered Species Working Group, and it will be published shortly. So this is the infographic, this is the pamphlet, the front, the back, and this is the poster. And then one of the other activities we did was just enforcement. With enforcement, we want to increase capacity, just with response to cases, whether criminal cases or just responding to a crocodile on the loose or a displaced animal. Now, we organized a workshop, worked closely with Hope Zoo and NEPA, and all 3 of us led it. It was me, Leighton, and Joey. It was an amazing, really successful day, 19 participants. And it was participants from NEPA, UDC, and Hope Zoo. We did a theory and practical session in ecology, response, and safe handling, and also gave some equipment to everyone. And we are planning to do some more in the future. And just some of the other activities were just outreach, more social media stuff, which is a key thing, taking part in the Head Start health screens, which I think Joey will also touch on, and then just getting the word out there as much as possible with TV and radio features, and then supporting outreach activities. Enforcement activities. And then in terms of the activities for this year that we're continuing, USAID was dismantled back in January, which did affect the funding and the project a bit, but we do have funding now from Rewild, which is great. We're continuing the monitoring of the population. We're going to do some more workshops, as I had mentioned. We're going to drop a radio ad soon, which everyone should listen out for. And we hope that this really catchy jingle gets the message across about how to be what we call jam crockwise. We want to just develop an actual Jam Croc outreach program, and crocodile signage, and possibly a website to have an official platform to share information and resources. Thank you for listening. Any questions?
Okay, thank you for sharing, Trey. I believe we will hold the questions till, well, not necessarily hold. If there are comments in the chat, we will review and share, in between presentation segments, but I'm not seeing any just now. But let us just, on behalf of everyone tuning in, have to give commendations for all the, for you firstly setting the context as it relates to the threats that are facing crocodiles, and, a lot of considerations coming in. But overall, we're grateful for the kind of research and outreach that is clearly making an impact, shifting the understanding of crocodiles and hopefully our attitudes towards, our indigenous reptiles in Jamaica. So Trey did very well in setting the situational framework. And now I want to head over to Ricardo, who will now dive into the legal framework, as he'll be touching on the Wildlife Protection Act and crocodiles in Jamaica. So Ricardo is the coordinator of fauna within the Ecosystems Management Branch at NEPA. And just to give a more background as to who he is, Ricardo is a zoologist and long-serving conservation leader at NEPA, as I mentioned, with over 20 decades of impact. He leads efforts to protect Jamaica's native, protected, and endangered species, including the American crocodile, Jamaican boa, yellow-billed parrot, giant swallowtail butterfly, and marine turtles. Ricardo began his career with a landmark study on game bird populations and has since developed and implemented national management plans, most notably for the American crocodile, ensuring science-based conservation strategies are regularly updated and enforced. Under his leadership, NEPA's fauna program has expanded its national reach and international partnerships, building strong collaborations with entities such as Hope Zoo, CropDocs, IUCN, and Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna sites to enhance research, training, and capacity building. Ricardo is a graduate of the University of the West Indies with a master's in marine and terrestrial ecosystems, and he continues to shape Jamaica's wildlife conservation agenda through evidence-based management and stakeholder engagement. Again, he'll be sharing on the Wildlife Protection Act and crocodiles in Jamaica. Please make him welcome.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Swaby. Please confirm that you're hearing me well.
You're good.
Okay, great. My presentation, first of all, it is a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the invitation. Trey did a wonderful job, and I'm going to go straight into my presentation, which is to look at the Wildlife Protection Act and crocodiles in Jamaica. Now, the Wildlife Protection Act, I realize most persons hear it, but they don't know the intricacies of the act. So I'm going to go through it more like a summary, not getting into too much details, and then I'm going to give a little bit about why it's important to conserve the American crocodile. Now, there are 3 legislative instruments that looks at wildlife protection and their habitats in Jamaica. The first one is the Natural Resources Conservation Authority Act, the NRCA Act. Then you have the Endangered Species Conservation and Regulation of Trade Act of 2000. And then you have the Wildlife Protection Act, which was established in 1945. Now, the first two acts are more looking at a general sense, especially the NRCA Act is more looking at habitat and conservation of our natural resources, which wildlife is a part of. The Endangered Species Act is now more looking at trade, trade between countries and so forth, and make sure that trade is done on a conservation basis. Now, what we're going to look into is the Wildlife Protection Act. Now, the Wildlife Protection Act looks directly at protecting individual species from persecution and unlawful hunting. As I mentioned, it was formulated back in 1945, and it has undergone several amendments, with the most recent one being just a couple months ago in March 2025. Now, the Wildlife Protection Act has 23 sections, and I'm going to summarize them for you so you get a better understanding of what the Act is all about. Now, the first two sections, sections 1 and 2, are really about defining terms and so forth in the Act. Like, you have to clearly define what is a bird, for example, what is a protected species, because this is now an instrument, a legal instrument for which persons can be charged. So we have to be clear about what each aspect is. So there are definitions for things like game warden, hunt, what is hunting? It defines that and so forth. Sections 3 to 7 look at game sanctuaries and game reserves. It looks at game bird hunting during the hunting season, and it looks at hunting of protected animals, which would be illegal hunting, as you can imagine. Now, sea turtles, taking off sea turtle eggs in particular, gets its own section. So Section 8 deals entirely with the illegal take of turtle eggs. Section 9 to 12 overlaps with the fisheries a bit. It talks about taking off immature fish, improper fishing practices such as dynamite fishing, release of pollutants into waterways containing fish and marine life. So that is Section 9 to 12. Section 13 of the Wildlife Protection Act looks at the appointment of officers and game wardens who would go out and be one of the first responders when there are breaches. That image, for example, you can see game wardens from NEPA during the hunting season inspecting the hunters and the birds they've taken. Section 14 looks at the power of the minister in charge of the environment to make regulations to better carry out the provisions of the Wildlife Protection Act. So the regulations are quick changes that can be made without having to amend the entire act, because amending the act itself is a rather lengthy process. So, for example, in order to declare a hunting season each year, you do a regulation which tells the date the hunting season is going to start, when it's going to end, the types of birds and so forth. So each year you can change that. So that is done through a regulation rather than an amendment of the act, because that would take a much longer process. Now, sections 15, 16, and 17 looks at the powers that are given to officers and to game wardens. You talk about the powers to enter premises without a warrant for the purposes of enforcing the Wildlife Protection Act. And some people might think that is strange, but due to the, the expiring nature of wildlife crimes, game wardens and officers are given the power to enter without a search warrant to, confiscate wildlife and so forth. Now, sections 18 to 21 talk about the offenses, talk about, what is done contrary to the law and what the penalties are. And section 22 is an important section because it grants the minister the power of exemption. So the minister can exempt anyone, provided they make an application, and the purpose for their exemption is for conservation or scientific research, history, or education. Think of the Hope Zoo, for example. The reason Hope Zoo is able to have protected species in captivity for display, for educational purposes, and so forth, is because they have an exemption from us here at NEPA to have those species. So they're exempted from the law, which states that they should not have, these protected species. And the final section talks about forfeiture. For example, if someone is caught doing something illegal or they have an illegal animal, say a crocodile in their possession, it is automatically forfeited to the government of Jamaica. So we take possession of it. There is no argument about it. Even if they're within, say, a game reserve with a vehicle conducting illegal activities, illegal hunting, to the discretion of the court can, let them forfeit the vehicle or the weapons that they're using. So, forfeiture is another important aspect. Now, the Wildlife Protection Act also has 4 schedules. So these are 4 sections at the end. And the first section talks about the game sanctuaries. It gives a description of the game sanctuaries. There are, I believe, 17 game sanctuaries. It shows maps of the boundaries and so forth. So it defines what the game sanctuaries are. The second schedule speaks about game birds, the birds that are being hunted. Because if the Wildlife Protection Act is protecting these wildlife, game birds are a special aspect where we allow persons to hunt within a certain time frame, and of course, once they have a permit to do so. And the second schedule also talks about non-protected birds. And this is important because how the law is written, how the Wildlife Protection Act is written is that all birds are protected because we have so many. We have over 300 species of birds when we count the migrants that are coming in and passing through. So it's easier to create a list of birds that are not protected rather than creating an exhaustive list of over 300 species. So the non-protected birds would include things like chicken. We eat chicken every day. It's a bird, so it's not protected. So people can, slaughter chicken and cook it. It also includes, pet that you buy at your pet shop, budgies and little things like that. And it includes a lot of invasive species, introduced species that we actually want to get rid of out of our environment. And so, someone catching an invasive species, for example, would not be breaking the law. And the final, the third schedule, talk about the protected animals. And of course, the American crocodile is listed under the third schedule of the Wildlife Protection Act. Also listed are things like the Jamaican boa, sea turtles, the giant swallowtail butterfly. And I mentioned all birds are protected except those that are listed as non-protected in the second schedule. And of course, the last one, the fourth schedule, is actually very new. This was implemented in the last amendment in March 2025, where everything is, all the offenses are brought together in one area where you can now look at the offenses and immediately see what the maximum fine is and what the terms of imprisonment are in the event that they're unable to pay the fine. And actually, in this last amendment, the fines and the terms of imprisonment have actually increased drastically. Before that period, it was $100,000 or up to 12 months imprisonment. It is now a maximum fine of $3 million or up to 3 years imprisonment. So that is a good win and hopefully will serve as a deterrent. Now, the Wildlife Protection Act and the crocodile. The American crocodile, and let me just state it here clearly, is protected under the Wildlife Protection Act, and so it is an offense to have in one's possession the whole animal or part thereof, whether alive or dead, including eggs, teeth, skin. As long as it's a part of a crocodile, it is illegal to have it in their possession. It is also an offense to harm, kill, or willfully molest a crocodile or its nest. And this is the updated fine. The penalty is now a maximum of $3 million, as I mentioned, or a maximum of 3 years imprisonment. And this amendment is very recent, just 2 months ago. My presentation is coming to an end because it's a very brief presentation. Now, why protect the crocodile? You will see Ms. Pickin gave a very long and good presentation on the plight of the crocodile. So why is it we're trying to protect the crocodile? First off, it is an important species. All species are important and they do play a vital role in the ecosystem. We want to look at the intrinsic value of these species, not just what benefit they are to us. I think it's rather selfish when we start to think, what does this thing do for us? The fact that it is here, it is ordained to be here. It was here long before humans arrived. And that goes back to our natural heritage. the crocodile has been a part of the Jamaican landscape from before even the Tainos arrived in Jamaica. And of course, long before Columbus came and all the Europeans. So the crocodile has been here. They basically own Jamaica. It is the largest predator on the island, and that is something we need to be proud of. A lot of countries do not have something like this to showcase. The issue comes in when we have this human crocodile conflict, and people are jostling for position, for space. But we now need to ensure that we have enough space allocated for the crocodiles, for where they can be, they can continue to live in perpetuity. And as Treya mentioned, man-made wetlands are now becoming a popular refuge for crocodiles. And these man-made wetlands include sewage ponds. The crocodile is featured on our coat of arms. It's something to be proud of. It's right there on top of the coat of arms, as you can see in that image. And of course, there is that benefit to us, and I'll leave that for last, because that shouldn't be the reason why we're protecting the crocodile, but it's a reason nonetheless. It offers income, financial income for lots of communities, especially we can think of, the Black River Safari Tours, for example. The entire town of Black River is built on the crocodile adventures and the crocodile safari tours and just wildlife and ecotourism in general. And so it's important to have, a good, healthy population of crocodiles. Imagine tourists arriving and going on one of these tours and not seeing any crocodiles on the river. So it is an important species in that regard. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Miller, for grounding us in the legal landscape and the affordances under the wildlife protection, afforded under the Wildlife Protection Act. And so from your presentation, we're increasingly aware that the legislation is essential, and that also must be supported by the awareness and enforcement. And based on our next presenter, community engagement and action as well. But I really have to make a quick plug. I perked up a little bit more when you mentioned Black River, because that's where I'm from. And so I really can attest to the fact that it is part and parcel of our cultural identity there, in relation to, growing up, going along the safari, taking people along and, treating people to boat rides. So they normally call Black River a ghost town. So we're very proud, of course, what's there to do in Black River? The safari, of course. So we do appreciate that. So now we're going to transition to Damien White, who is a biologist and environmental advocate with over 26 years of experience in conservation, research, and public engagement. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Biology and an MPhil in Zoology, and is currently pursuing a PhD in zoology at the University of the West Indies, Mona, where he also lectures part-time in the Department of Life Sciences. Now, Damien has authored over 11 peer-reviewed articles and more than 85 scientific reports with research spanning Jamaica's endangered species and invasive threats. He leads science outreach, and if I dare say so myself, has done well in the area of citizen science and engagement on the Roosters World JA across social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, and works closely with schools, churches, and community groups to promote environmental awareness. Damon serves on several national committees, including chair of NEPA's Endangered Species Working Group, deputy chair of the Invasive Species Advisory Group, and member of the Jamaican Iguana Recovery Group and the Scientific Authority. Damon is also president of the BirdLife Jamaica and an active member of other local regional, or a member, of BirdLife Jamaica, an active member of local and regional environmental NGOs. So beyond the science, he enjoys outdoors. So, and if you're keeping up with Roosters World, we all would know this. He loves caving, cooking, and playing sports, including football and rugby. So now over to you, Damien, as you speak on croc value, mitigating human-wildlife conflict through community engagement and education.
All right, you hear me clear? You hear me clear? Right, so just one change there. I'm no longer the president of BirdLife Jamaica. I don't want the current president to have my head. But I'm doing the fun part today in talking about mitigating human-wildlife conflict through community engagement and education. And one of the things that we do first, we have to get the baseline information. And Trey talk about the American crocodile, but to reach the community, I want Jamaicans to feel more a part of it. So, common name can be used it's a name that different countries can use, our community, and we'd like Jamaicans to feel more to the crocodile. You know, we can call it our Jamaican crocodile. It's well armored, it's great gain. Adults grow up to about 6 meters long. They can live up to 100 years. What they eat, and it's a common question everybody asks when you go out there, they eat fish, birds, small mammals, reptiles, including other crocodiles. They eat a lot of crabs and other mollusks. Now, where do we find them in Jamaica? The beaches. So our crocodile is a salt river crocodile, is a saltwater crocodile, and they're found in different environments. They're also found in wetlands. They're also found in some of our rivers. And we mentioned about Black River. Black River is one of them. They're found in Rio Minna. So several rivers in Jamaica have crocodiles. They're also found in man-made systems. Over to the right there, that's a man-made pond. That's a Caymanas pond. We have right there, we have drains. If we look at Riverton, we get reports of crocodile there. And even in gullies. But what we're talking about today is sewage treatment plants. So to a crocodile, a sewage treatment plant is like any other wetland that was shown before. It has a lot of the characteristics of a wetland. So a croc doesn't really differ a sewage plant that has ponds from a natural wetland. So those are the habitats you normally find. Now, part of doing engagement, we have to get information. And we do a lot of study, well, I should say I do a lot of studies on sewage plants. And we use some of this information to create content to use with the people. So we do population size, nest monitoring using camera traps. We also work with Joey, which is there. When opportunities we get a dead croc show up, we try to find out what the crocodile is eating. We do present, absent, and for public engagement, we talk to the community when we go to relocate a crocodile. We're also going to troubled areas, and we also get information from the community. So we give information and we get back information. That's what citizen science is all about. Now, nest monitoring, what we talk about. So crocodiles like to build their nests in elevated area. So what we mean, higher areas than the water body. And to the right, to the left here, we have a picture of natural at a river bank where, you know, the normal soil is soil such as sand and, you know, sandy soil. However, at the sewage plants that we're talking about, that a lot of people don't know, the sewage plant berms are made of mostly limestone. And the crocs, as you can look at my small foot there, size 12, you can see how big the hole, so that's our croc nest. So they dig and they lay in there. So we do nest monitoring. And we use the content from our studies to use on social media. Now here is a mommy croc. And interestingly, we found this nest, surprisingly, about 20 meters from a water source. And as you can see, normally you will not find a crocodile way inland like that doing defensive mechanism. She's telling me, stay far from me, rooster, don't come near to my nest. So mommies are very protective of their nest. Now here we have a mommy, and remember I mentioned about trail cameras. So look at mommy here. We put the trail cameras in areas that we believe is a nest. And here what she's doing, when she hear her baby making sounds, she comes to the nest and she digs. So the babies don't really dig out. Mommy comes and digs nest so the babies can come out. However, there are a lot of predators that comes to the nest. And most of this research was carried out on a few sewage ponds. So let's see. So here we have an heron looking about. That's a baby croc. So that's one of the natural predators. Yeah, the heron of it. And another thing that we have found out in carrying out studies that when you have young hatchlings or juveniles, they often need a shaded area with vegetation for them to survive. This by evading other predators, which are birds, other crocodiles, so they need the vegetation. So normally when you go to a river or even some of these sewage ponds, the areas that are heavily vegetated is where you find the young crocs. Now, what are crocs eating? As Mr. Miller stated before, you can get in trouble to have any part of a crocodile. However, we have been allowed, game wardens are allowed by NEPA, or when you get a opportunistic, maybe a roadkill, or for example, that crocodile to the right, it was during mating season. The males were fighting, and sorry, one lost, and he's here no more. So this provides information for us to find out what they're eating. Now that crocodile was taken from a sewage plant, and Joey Brown here and his team here did a necroscopy. And I want to bring this out to people. What are crocodiles eating at some of these sewage ponds? Look to the right. That's condoms, plastics, sanitary pads, panty liners. All of these stuff are not digested in the crocodile's stomach. So the crocodile belly will be full, but it can't digest it. So the things that we do affect our animals. Now, what other animals are present at the sewage plant, since we are talking about that today? Well, that right there is a leastern. So we do have a number of wetland birds, and there we have a leastern fighting blackneck stilt. So for years that I'm doing, there are several wetland birds that you found there. One of the most rare ducks, one of our ducks are found there. The West Indian whistling duck, which is a Caribbean endemic, is found at the sewage plant. And there, as you can see, monitor nest, you have leasterns, you have killdeers to the right, you have Antillean nighthawk. All of this nesting occur at a sewage plant. So when people hear about sewage plant, a lot of animals live there. We also have mongoose. So yes, the mongoose are one of the predators that goes to the crocodile nest and dig up. You find them there. We also have kitties. They comes out at night, and this kitty was curious with the trail camera, and we have records of them getting hatchlings. We also have rats and a lovely dogs. A lot of dogs come to the sewage plant. So one of the things that we tell people living near areas with crocodile, if your pets go near to the ponds or go near to the river where the crocodiles are, things can happen. We also have bats, and I have a picture there of a fish-eating bat. We have over 9 species of bats being recorded at the sewage plant. So the point that I'm making, these sewage ponds play a role in the ecosystem. It's man-made, but a number of animals live there. Now, what's the value of crocodiles to the ecosystem? As Mr. Miller mentioned before, I would like to go from the science part. They maintain balance in the food chain, control the population of aquatic animals. So if you take out the main predator, it can get the ecosystem in whack. They are also habitat engineers, meaning crocodiles digs a lot, burrow, and during the dry season, some of these water holes provide a home for several animals. And they remove carrion and they do it nutrient recycle. Now, public engagement. A number of us here presenting here do a lot of public engagement. It's not a one-man team. We all are friends, we all work together. So what do we call public engagement here? We reach out to people on social media. We put a lot of content. All the information that I mentioned before, nothing beats video. So when you show somebody a video like mongoose going to crocodile nest, they will understand more than Rooster that's talking off his mouth. Also, when we go to areas to relocate crocodiles, we speak to the people there. And also people near sewage pond, the communities and that we talk. We also go on TV and radio and try to reach out to more people. Now we're social media. 3.27 million people have cellular phone. 1.61 and climbing use TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. So we can use this tool to reach a lot of people. Now, one of the things, as I mentioned, When we go to an area, if we relocate in a crocodile, we let the people hold it to let them see how soft it is. One. And by doing this, we can pass on encouragement. Don't harm it. You know, it's part of us. And that kind of deal with the aggression that people have towards crocodiles. We're not saying that crocodiles are not dangerous. We're asking you to respect them. We also talk to people about their pets. Now here we have a dog here barking at Mommy Croc. And sometimes Mommy Croc went after the dog. We don't want anything to happen to your pet, but people need to be aware of it. If you don't control your pets at night and you live near areas with crocodile, they will go, and the conflicts like this can go the wrong way. We also like to show people what we are doing to crocodiles. This is a river that full of garbage. The garbage also block their nesting sites. So when you put information and show people, they're like, wow, we did this. We also share to the public that it's illegal to poach, to take the egg. And one of the growing problems that we have in here, people are watching a lot of social media content, watching TV, gator boys and so, and feel like they can jump in the water and catch a dangerous animal. Please leave it to the experts. We have training sessions here, as you see Joy and the team, where we do refreshers. So no matter how good we are, we go back, we relearn, we are trained. So we don't want anybody to hurt themselves, and we don't want people to hurt the crocodiles. Now, one of the next thing with social media, as you can see here, Joey went for this crocodile, and what touched me with this crocodile rescue is when we asked the gentleman about, you know, why you call us to come to the area, because we know that people poach crocodile. He was said, oh, Rooster and Joy, we follow you on social media. We care about the animals. So just to tell you that the things that we do on social media, it have a big reach. No, we also, and Mr. Miller went in it. If you see a crocodile, contact NEPA. If you can't contact NEPA, you can reach out to Treya, Joy, one of us. However, all the people who are integral in moving crocodiles have been trained and get permission. If you are not trained and you don't get permission, as what Mr. Miller said, a $3 million fine can catch you. I don't want that to happen to you. No, we also get information from the people. So it's a two-way street. We give information and we get back information. So what are we getting? Increase with people telling us about people having as for pets. And there are cases in Carnon where they found people having them pets. People will reach out to me on social media, boy, I don't want to get in any trouble. Rooster, what should I do? And I said, you know, having a crocodile, you can get yourself in trouble. The only people who have crocodile have got a permit. And there's also an increase where a number of people are eating crocodiles at these parties and also posting it on TikTok. And the good thing now, a number of people are sharing when they see things like that to people, to us, and we can bring it to the authority. What we're also getting, people are now talking about there's increased conflicts with getting crabs. Crabs is not an infinite resources. Crabs live in wetland. And a lot of people now are going in the wetland and they encounter crocodile. So somebody said, let me get rid of the crocodile so I can catch more crab. Without understanding that the crocodile play a role in you getting those lovely crab. People are also following some myths and the fear and will destroy the eggs, which are totally illegal. We also keep on getting people, you see in videos of untrained community members capturing the animal and putting their life at risk, and they're also injuring the animal. We also, one of the next thing that we are getting is in having some of these dialogue in areas where there are recreational areas where there are crocodiles, especially in Carnon, people are nervous of putting up signage because they said if the signage is placed there, then nobody will come to my recreational place to swim or to eat. On the other hand, I feel if there are crocodiles in an area, I think persons coming there to swim needs to know. So it's a big social conflict on how you manage it. And I think we have to find ways of managing it, because if you don't, people will harm the crocodile. So this is one of the problems that are coming up when you're having community conversation. Now in areas, we got this picture in Hellshire. Now what people are not aware of are that crocodiles move, especially during mating season. They might move from one wetland to the other. We don't know why. Maybe they're looking for food. Maybe they're going to check their friends. And we're asking people in these areas to slow down and try and not to catch the crocodile. It will walk over to the other wetland. We also know people cutting off the tail. All of this information was shared on social media. So it shows that people care. The next thing is a number of people are reporting infractions. And one of the things when people report infractions, they want you to act now. So for example, they would send a picture that this gentleman is on live with a crocodile in a pond, showing what he's doing to get more likes. And they're wondering, how comes the authority don't come and deal with this gentleman? And it's a problem, because if people keep on doing the same thing and there's no action, then they feel that the crocodile conservationists are not doing their job. One of the big problems that we're getting, and we have to go in community to deal with it, people are going to sewage plants and other areas to feed crocodile. Some are cruel by putting dogs. To the left, there's a dog, pieces of a dog, that's as if where they throw in to watch the crocodile eat the dog. When you feed a crocodile, it will, every time you come there, it thinks that it will get food. And if somebody fall in that water, things can happen. We implore, we beg people, do not feed crocodiles. Let them be, let them do what they do naturally. Do not feed crocodiles. Now, one of the interesting things that happened is the public outcry that we have got about what happened at Hellshire. And if you looked at the middle here, Joy and all of us did a post, and maybe 11.4 million people viewed the post. And there were so much like, and there were so much people asking questions and unhappy about it and trying to rally what we can do about it. I mean, in several years, something like this happened, you'd have the minister say that there's going to be a probe. We would not even have this start going on right now. This is showing that people care, and this is showing that we can do better. And just remember, and as I tell everybody, it's a Jamaican crocodile. It's the largest native animal we have, and a fluid crocodile. Peace. Thank you again. And I now pass you on to Joy.
Just before Joy, sorry, let me interject, but thanks for that. A fluid crocodile, I love that. But Damien, we do appreciate the compelling insights that you shared, and even more so emphasizing that, you know, education and awareness goes hand in hand. And I think all the presentations are feeding into each other and making this compelling case for us to drive home the point that, you know, the attitudes towards the education and awareness does make a difference in enhancing appreciation and how we engage. So, and if we leave with nothing, we definitely know to leave it to the experts. So if we're going to be engaging with crocodiles and there's no experts around, that should tell us that we don't have $3 million or 3 years to end up on the wrong side of the law. So really great insights as it relates to the human-wildlife coexistence. We do see some opportunity for follow-up, but I just want to acknowledge that there is some engagement in the chat, and we embrace that. So we will answer your questions after, but please keep the questions going. So while we love that you're watching now, the questions that you're asking will benefit those who are also watching later. And so to round off our panel of speakers, we're going to move to Joey Brown. Joey is the general curator at Hope Zoo, a nonprofit zoo and wildlife rescue facility here in Kingston, Jamaica. He oversees over 1,400 animals, and he leads a dedicated animal care team and manages Conservation Head Start program for the critically endangered Jamaican iguana. Joey is a Fulbright research scholar and National Geographic explorer. He holds a Master of Science from the University of Oklahoma and a bachelor's from the University of Kansas. His graduate work focused on the spatial ecology and conservation of the critically endangered Philippine crocodile and Fijian crested iguana. Joey previously worked in the herpetology department at the San Diego Zoo and is a founding board member of the Animal Assisted Recovery Care AARC program, which launched Jamaica's first animal therapy initiative at the Bustamante Children's Hospital. Now, over to you, Joey, as you delve into mission conservation, Hope Zoo's role in the protection of crocodiles in Jamaica.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Swaby. You see my screen okay? Wait. Oh, wait. There we go.
There we go.
Hold on. Let me change something. Wait, skip the slide. What's going on? Where is 1 second? Where did that go? I want to go to my view's messed up right now. 1 second.
Okay, no problem. Joey, do you want us to throw out one question to your panelists while we...
Just trying to figure this out.
All right. So...
All right, I'll just go get started. I mean, it's...
Okay, go, no problem. All right.
What's going on? So yes, thanks for having me, Swaby. I'm excited. We're going to talk about mission conservation, Hope Zoo's role in the protection of crocodiles here in Jamaica. So just a quick outline. I'm going to briefly touch on the outreach and kind of capacity building we do at the zoo. Obviously, a lot of the wildlife rehab and rescue work that we do both at the zoo and all around the island. And then talked about some of our collaborative work that kind of Trey and Damien talked about at the Holland Bay Crocodile Sanctuary. And then we'll kind of end off on kind of what even sparked today's discussion at the Portmore sewage ponds. First, I mean, starting off, I just got to big up my animal care team at the zoo. Working at a zoo is busy enough, but being a wildlife rescue facility, it's definitely never a dull day. We have a team of 15 zookeepers, full-time veterinarian, and these guys work their tail off, and I couldn't be more proud of them. We already have 1,400 animals, and then every other day there's a new rescue animal coming in, so big up to these guys. So first and foremost, one of our biggest roles in conservation would definitely be our impact kind of in public education. Every day we have countless school kids and families visiting the zoo, and that's really where the zoo plays a daily vital role, kind of in awareness and conservation from not just crocodiles but all animals. These kids can come to the zoo and see animals that they would only see on TV, and I can promise you there's no more kind of like impactful way for these kids to learn or overcome a fear than when they can actually touch and put that animal in their hands. We get kids come to the zoo every day that are terrified of a crocodile, and then within 5 minutes they have the biggest smile on their face, and they're petting it. And we also do a lot of outreach, going to visiting different schools, different fundraising events, getting out there as much as we can, from primary school all the way up to college kids. It really makes a big difference. So kind of one of the other big roles we do, kind of helping out kind of with the local community, is some of the croc workshops that Treya and kind of Damien mentioned. So this is one of the big kind of capacity building efforts we're able to assist with and provide. This really helps out with our local NGOs and government agencies. I'm going to start a little video. So the first one we did back in 23 was with CCAM and NEPA. And see, this starts. There we go. So the workshops to focus, on, safe practices of capture, restraint, and transport. So it's a day-long thing. We usually start off with smaller crocs and work our way up to bigger crocs. And this is really valuable stuff to share with, our colleagues around the island. Kind of one, it obviously keeps them safe if they encounter a croc or they have to help out with croc rescues. And it also improves these chances of saving crocs. There's, as you guys will learn, these croc rescues pop up at the most random times and all around the island. We can't all be there. So the more people that we can have properly trained, we can have a more rapid response to these croc rescues. Because Treya, Damien, Ricardo, they can all vouch for you. There's been countless times where, we've lost crocodiles just because we didn't get there quick enough or it was too far away. So these workshops really help with the capacity building and training our fellow colleagues around that can help with these kind of croc rescues, and also with more outreach work with the public. So we did another one in 24. This one was focused with NEPA and JDF, more government agencies. Treya mentioned the JDF, Jamaica Constabulary Force. We work routinely with them. Crocs in the communities, crocs popping up in the middle of the night. And these guys often help us out all the time. And so getting them trained, getting them comfortable with crocs is a really big kind of productive effort we can do. And number two, it kind of builds our network amongst kind of, these people on the island, when you need help at a certain time at night. These guys are, now that we've kind of become familiar and spent the day working with crocs together, it becomes much easier working together. And then one of the most recent ones we did, which Treya mentioned with the Jam Croc Initiative, was another workshop. And this was with NEPA and UDC. And this is, again, another full, fun day of productive kind of learning. Started off in the mornings with more kind of lectures and learning about kind of what we're learning about today. And then in the afternoons, we go out into the zoo and kind of get some hands-on practical work. Again, catching crocs, teaching these people how to, safely catch these crocs, restrain them. And then oftentimes what we have to do is transport them, whether it's for relocation or, bringing them back to the zoo if they happen to be a sick croc. And our goal is, by the end of the day, people feel that much more confident and experienced. So if a situation pops up, a week or two from now, they're going to be able to safely help these crocs and, deal with the communities wherever this might pop up. And it's really, it's awesome. Like, we have a really, awesome kind of collaborative network here, and it's just getting bigger every year. And so that's one of the most kind of awesome things to see. And we all have a lot of fun together. It's hard work, grueling work, but we have a good time together. So I'll kind of dive more into some of the kind of rescues outside the zoo. I just threw in some birds in there because those are some of our native birds. So obviously we don't deal with just crocs at the zoo. We do kind of rescue with all our native kind of endemic species here. But with crocs, we deal with human croc conflicts, but also kind of injured and kind of say rehab crocs as well. So the egg you see there in my hand, that was a baby that literally just hatched out moments before this picture. But that was an incident where a crocodile mom had laid her nest right in front of this lady's house. I believe it was in Old Harbor. And luckily the awesome guys at CCAM were able to respond right away before the nest got destroyed, because understandably, this family didn't want a crocodile nest right in front of their house that was going to be incubating on the ground for the next 3 months. So there's good chances that if the nest wasn't collected, then those eggs would have been destroyed by someone overnight. So CCAM made the good decision to kind of dig up the nest. They collected all the eggs and they brought them to the zoo, and we were able to incubate those eggs in our incubator here at the zoo for the next month until all the babies hatched out. And then the sick looking croc, you see there's another good kind of cool case study. So this is a croc we named Captain Hook. This was a wild crocodile from Salt River. He was pretty much got tangled in a illegal fishing net. That's where he was found. And they pretty much thought he was dead, because you can see the pictures on the left when he came to us. The poor thing, I couldn't believe it. He looked like a skeleton. You can see he has, his neck, his spine are sticking out. They normally store a lot of their fat in their tails. His tail's bone skinny. He was super dehydrated. And the thing just looked like almost like a skeleton of a crocodile with scales on it. And we were really worried if he was going to make it or not. But, thanks to, again, the vet team, our keeper team, with some good TLC, routine fluids, some routine medication, this croc was able to bounce back. And the croc on the right looks like a totally different croc, but that's still Captain Hook, looking much healthier and much better after some time at the zoo. And so I'd say one of the most common things kind of when it comes to croc rescue and croc conservation is definitely the human-crocodile conflicts. And when I say, it's kind of like the technical term that's used internationally. So that's just when crocodiles are popping up in the community, popping up where, people's houses, and so that's usually where we have to kind of intervene. And then we also do get some, sick crocs as well. For instance, the picture on the left, that's a croc that Leighton from NEPA had brought to the zoo. It was awesome. He had found that crocodile up in Hellshire. It was in these people's kind of a housing community. But Leighton thankfully noticed that the croc looked very sick and dehydrated. So he was able to bring that croc all the way to the zoo, and we got it some fluids, and we got that croc fixed up in just a couple months. And then in the middle there, it's with me and Ricardo. It was a crazy hurricane storm day where we had a double croc rescue down in Bull Bay, driving through flooded storms because 2 crocs had popped up down there. And again, it's one of those things where if we don't respond to those things, there's a good chance those crocodiles are likely going to get killed by people that may not care for them around there. And then the picture on the right is a good one with Treya at the airport, actually. So obviously the airport's right out in the middle of Palisados, Kingston Harbor, plenty of crocs around there. And this croc had actually wandered into the cargo parking lot, somehow got through the fence, but then couldn't get out. So it was just kind of walking around the lot. But thankfully the guards and security guard had given, I think, NEPA a call at the time, and we were able to get out there first thing in the morning. So it's this awesome collaboration with all these agencies that kind of makes these kind of rescues possible. Here's another busy day with Leighton from NEPA. This was, again, a random Sunday that turned into a double crocodile rescue. Crocodiles, they like to pick the worst times. It's either they get into occasions, it's usually in the middle of the night or on a Sunday or right during traffic. So Leighton and I were actually driving to Hellshire because we had a report about this small croc on the right in the purple box. And it was just a small one. So we were already on our way to Hellshire. And on our way to Hellshire, we got a call about this other croc in Greater Portmore. So we quickly went and got the small croc and then came back to Greater Portmore to find out that picture on the left, the crocodile was actually underneath that kind of drainage gully and under that road. And we had to climb in the gully in the water about knee high and go noose that croc because there was obviously a big crowd of people there and he wasn't going to do well. So we were able to catch up that croc, pull him out, put him in my truck, and we were able to relocate him later that day. But that croc pops back up. You'll see here in a sec. So crocodile, and all our crocodile kind of rescues, anytime we capture a croc, we're always collecting data. That's one of the most kind of important things we can do. I have a video I'll play here in a sec where we're able to put these microchips, what we call pit tags, in the crocs that kind of give them a permanent identification that allows us to track their permanent movements. This particular croc was actually the one that Leighton and I caught in Greater Portmore, and then he turned up 4 months later at this little pond right by Greater Portmore Primary School. And so NEPA was getting countless calls about, there's literally this little drainage ditch right behind the school, and the drainage ditch is between the school and the football field. And, this little 6-7 foot croc was just hanging out there, but obviously it's a risk to the kids no matter what. Even though he wasn't trying anything, it's still something, we weren't going to let happen. And so we'd actually spend a couple of days there trying to look for him and catch him. And the kids would come out every day and would be cheering us on, trying to help us find them. And, that was really cool because they were being really supportive. We were giving them our binoculars, trying to look around, and they were having a blast, and we had a blast with them too, And so it's one of those things that kind of Damien mentioned is in the middle of all this, one of the most important things is kind of building these relationships with the local communities, and especially the kids. And, because they're the ones who are now going to have a kind of better outlook on these crocs moving forward. So I'll play this video, kind of talks about some of the data, or how we track the croc. So these are what we call pit tags. They're pretty much tiny little microchips that we put in the crocodiles. Each microchip has its own unique 9-digit number. And so it comes in like a little syringe, it's like the size of a grain of rice. And then we insert that underneath the skin and the base of the tail on the left side. And so then if we ever catch a croc, we can scan, boom, and this number pops up. So then we can look this number up in our database, and it tells us, okay, on January 22nd, we caught this croc in Portmore, this date, and then we'll get all the body measurements, and all those body measurements from this date in this GPS location will go in the database. And so this microchip, it will last its whole lifetime. So we could catch this croc 30 years from now, scan this, and it'll tell us exactly who it is. Okay. And so the goal is, as we catch all these crocs around Jamaica, we give them all microchips, and that way you can kind of keep track of them in the database. Then we also cut the tail scutes as well. So this is another good visual identification where each croc has its own unique identification system. So there's so obviously you have what we call it tail scutes here, and you have always have a double row, and then it comes into a single row. And so there's a numbering scheme to them. So these scutes are kind of like the ones, so the 1 through 9. Mm-hmm. These are your 10s, and these are your 100s. And so this croc has number 9 cut, so I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then we look on this side, he's got this one cut. So we go 1, 2, which would be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Mm-hmm. So this croc is 59. Mm-hmm. So just like that, we can look at 59 in the tail scute database, and it'll show this croc. Mm-hmm. And so that was just kind of a neat insight into how we can kind of track and monitor these crocs and collect some really valuable data on them. So kind of one of the more dark sides of wildlife rescue, people often think, working in wildlife conservation, you're just saving animals. Unfortunately, you deal with a lot of death, and it's definitely one of the more depressing parts of the job. But kind of like Damien mentioned is, even when these crocs die, no matter what the case is, they can still provide some valuable data. And so these necropsies, post-mortem exams, are absolutely critical to learning about the crocs, learning about their diet, learning what parasites they might have, and learning about, the environment. Opening up these crocs can really tell us about, did they come from Clarendon? Did they come from Portmore? What kind of ill effects do they maybe have? What kind of parasites they have? And so that's one thing Damien kind of joked about earlier whenever he gets a dead croc, I encourage people to call me, because sometimes people will just dispose of, bodies. And so, but I encourage people to please call, because, even if it's a dead croc on the side of the road, we can still learn a lot. Although it's not the most fun, stinky kind of process. So you see the first croc, or the second croc on the left there, that was one from like 4 years ago, that a croc that was found dead, and we ended up opening up his stomach, and his stomach was totally impacted, full of over I think 27 plastic bags. That croc had a death sentence already. There's no way its digestive system was working. The croc on the bottom, I think it was another similar instance, but you can see his shoulder blades popping up. He was incredibly ill, almost like a skeleton. And we were able to open him, kind of do a necropsy exam on him, and find out some pretty interesting stuff. The croc on the right, the big guy, Damien, that was a big thanks to Damien. That was one he actually mentioned briefly earlier. That was a big croc that died naturally, actually, from the Hellshire sewage ponds. But Damien was awesome. He gave us a call right away, and we drove down there, and we were able to do a necropsy on site. And, that's when we opened up and found a lot of interesting condoms and garbage and plastic inside of his stomach. So again, not the most fun part of the job, but it's actually it's actually really interesting, that can help a lot in terms of what is going on. All right, something a little bit more fun and upbeat than dead crocs. Mr. Lawrence Enriquez at the Holland Bay Croc Sanctuary. So Damien and Treya and Nepa, this is Lawrence is our kind of main partner, collaborator, and he's an amazing individual that has a croc sanctuary down in St. Thomas, lives there and operates it by himself. He's got anywhere from 60, 80, 100 crocs at a time, depends how many babies. But the really fun thing about it is we all go down there usually at least once a year for an annual health screen. And this is, again, a really cool collaborative kind of project that we all do. So I bring, a Hope Zoo team down. I bring several zookeepers, our veterinarian. NEPA comes down. We get vets from the veterinary service department, and we try to encourage graduate students and stuff as well, because this is a really neat opportunity for anyone interested in wildlife to learn. And we also have our awesome international partners, Savannah and Gatorland and Joe Wazalewski, who come down from Florida multiple times a year, not only providing amazing support for Lawrence at the sanctuary, but they usually bring down expertise and then kind of what was I say, kind of exotic vets that come down and able to even share their knowledge with us. So it's this huge network, a few-day experience where we all kind of get together and have a fun day of learning a lot about crocs. So step one is catching the crocs. So we usually have a group of about 30 to 40 crocodiles we got to catch up. And Lawrence has a nice, it's literally like a natural sanctuary down there. So sometimes they'll have like 30 crocs in this giant muddy pool that you need to be caught up. And so we have an interesting time digging around this pond, pulling crocs out of underwater caves, and then passing them off to go get data on. Fortunately, it's super hot in St. Thomas, so that water actually feels really good, but that's definitely the more interesting part of the health screen. Steps 2 and 3 is after we catch the crocs, they then go to our vet station. So our vet here at the zoo, we have Dr. Don Harris, who's an exotic vet with 40 years experience from Florida. Each croc goes to the vet station. They do a body condition, looking at joints, making sure these crocs are growing healthy from, they're usually around 3 to 4 years old, and making sure everything's all right. This is a time where sometimes we'll catch maybe an abscess or we catch some eye ulcers. And if that stuff is caught early, then we can treat that early, and it's a better chance of, helping treat that croc. Fortunately, we have had no major issues, but it's still a great kind of learning experience. After the vet station, it then goes on for data collection, where you see the middle picture of Treya and Damani and the NEPA team. And then on the right, a couple of our zookeepers. We're getting measurements on the crocs. So, every year we're getting measurements on them so we can see how they're growing. Are they growing healthy? Any abnormalities? And still valuable stuff we can keep in the database. So just to finish off a bit, I just touch briefly on obviously the Portmore sewage ponds and the recent incident. I don't think people realize how the vast network of these ponds. So I feel like people think of it's a sewage pond, think of something small, but this is a huge network of kind of artificial ponds right in Portmore. And when you understand that, like Treya mentioned, is Portmore used to be a swamp wetland, and most of these crocs, their home is now taken away. So that's why these sewage ponds have become a home. And so this before slide is showing these were actually a small population down there that were thriving and doing very well. So, 10, 12, 13-foot crocs, tons of juveniles, yearlings. You're usually finding nests every couple of years. So despite the not the most ideal water conditions, these crocs were doing very well. Until Earth Day, which obviously is the most recent incident that kind of sparked this whole thing. You can see the drone picture on your right kind of gives you some good perspective, So that's the network of ponds now, and you can see Greater Portmore backing up. And that just shows you you look at that all used to be wetlands, and now their wetlands are gone. So now these crocs are obviously in the sewage ponds. The problem is some of these ponds went empty, and then obviously once the ponds get too low, the crocodiles can't climb out. And so when the ponds are full, the crocs can easily slide in and out of the pond. They move between all different ponds. Like I said, I've been joining NEPA with their croc surveys for the last 5 years. And we'll go down there at times, and count 20, 30, 40 crocs. And you go down maybe a couple months later and they're all in different ponds because they move throughout. But once these water levels dropped, unfortunately, the crocs got stuck. And then, they pretty much got cooked in the sun. And it was kind of brutal to see. I'm not going to, share, a bunch of pictures of dead crocs, but, we were literally walking around. A lot of the crocs were all around the edge of the pond. And if you see that picture in the bottom right, you could literally see all their track marks and skid marks kind of on the pond liner as they were literally all trying to climb out and they couldn't. And so they literally just got stuck and cooked in the sun. And so I think this is obviously one of the more horrifying kind of upsetting cases we found was with the male, which is on the bottom there, and the female on the top. So this is a male and female croc adult, a pair that died kind of their last moments together. The female has her head sitting there resting on the male's back. And sadly, even more sadly, is the female, during decomposition, her stomach had ruptured and she had a belly full of eggs. We kind of ended up counting over 27 eggs in her stomach that obviously didn't make it. And so I got a neat video the other day that will kind of show you the vast size of these sewage ponds and the area down there. In this pond alone, we found, I believe, ended up finding 8 other dead crocs. All of them, they're all around the sides except these 2. But as it zooms out, you can kind of see how big of an area is and how big those ponds are. Each of those ponds are bigger than football fields, but kind of lets you see how, I don't know. And then again, you have Portmore to the right, and then Hellshire and Great Salt Pond would be behind us to the left. But kind of lets you know when, now it may make more sense when you see, well, why are these crocs living in sewage ponds? Well, here's why. This is some of their only kind of water habitat around. Thankfully, there was like Damien mentioned, there's an amazing public outcry from this incident. And that was one of the cool things we were all impressed by. It was a bunch of crocodiles that, but everyone, whether you like crocodiles or not, people were, upset and voiced that, that how hurt they were. And that was cool. That's a good progression we've seen, is some more empathy towards these animals, even towards crocodiles. And so because of that, thankfully Minister Samuda and the government jumped on it right away. He reached out to us within a few days, and was, he was obviously horrified at this incident that took place. And he was incredibly supportive. He reached out and set up a meeting with NEPA and us, and we met down there literally within a few days of this. It was very encouraging to hear his support. And, he was going to make sure, talking with us about, whatever needs to be done to make sure this never happens again, he's going to make sure that's put in place. So that was very encouraging to see, because, although this is a very, very hard, kind of horrific learning lesson, at least hopefully something can come good of this. And so in the future, we have better, protections and kind of better protections for our wildlife put in place. So I figured to finish off, and that's the last slide. So to finish off some of the depressing stuff, say thank you slide for some smiles and crocodiles. So I just want to thank, the university and the Faculty of Life Sciences for, having this discussion, having, me, Ricardo, Damien, and Trey here to kind of continue this discussion and bring more awareness for our Jamaican crocs. So thank you.
Thank you as well, Joey. And no, don't be concerned. I mean, the depression is the reality that we have to embrace to make the change. But I do think what you have conveyed here is a lot of, as I mentioned, I keep saying appreciation, but for persons who are previously unaware, when we see the depth of the work that is going into conservation, that's going into the rescue, the rehabilitation, and even through your presentation just now, the capacity building efforts in relation to protecting crocodiles, it's really, really encouraging. And I'm sure that more people will be interested, because even on the side of capacity building, what you're doing is expanding the awareness, because when those people go back into their respective communities and so forth, over time, we're getting to the kind of attitude adjustment that we need with respect to crocodiles. And so we have quite some engagement going in the chat. So we're going to be throwing out questions to our panelists now. And I think the first question, but I just also want to encourage us to be mindful of the time as we approach the hour. So the first question, not sure who I can pose this to, but it says, how can we ensure the long-term sustainability of conservation efforts and protect Jamaica's crocodile population for future generations? I'm just gonna randomly go into my mental hat and pick Treya to tackle this question. So I'm gonna repeat, how can we ensure the long-term sustainability of conservation efforts and protect Jamaica's crocodile population for future generations?
Thank you for that question, Danelyn. So there's a lot that's currently happening with the conservation efforts. I think one of the key things which everyone really talked about was just promoting the safe coexistence between crocodiles and people. So we reduce the negative interactions that have been happening. So I think constant outreach and public education, continuing just to build capacity so we have more and more people responding island-wide. I think one of the key things which has been very effective is establishing more game wardens or even community-based groups that can be the leaders in their community that look out, like the wildlife warriors that look out for the crocodiles in their community and just monitor and reach out and educate those around them. So that's capacity building, outreach, and then continuing to monitor habitats and just enforcement of the Wildlife Protection Act in terms of especially tackling the illegal hunting trade. More needs to be done to protect wetlands. I think our protected area system needs redefining to an extent so that we can strictly protect our remaining wetlands that we have around Jamaica that we're seeing, because at the end of the day, we do need to keep a decent percentage of our natural habitat so that not just crocodiles, but all the species that live within these areas are safe and they're protected and they're thriving. And then, just continuous research as well, monitoring the population, but definitely the outreach and public education is key so that we can learn to coexist safely with our crocodiles. And also just certain infrastructure, more signage, more fencing in areas that are prone to human crocodile interactions, and just working out how we can balance our ecosystems that we have left and our anthropogenic landscapes.
All right. Thank you so much. And so while I think this question my next question, while I think it emerged from the presentation you gave when you mentioned about the fence that got eroded, but maybe I want Joey to tackle this as well, or if anyone else feel compelled. Are there any alternative infrastructural designs in planning for areas that have a high density of crocodiles, given that we're now occupying the crocodiles' natural habitats? Swamp areas, namely. Let me know if you have any thoughts on that, Joey.
Yeah, I mean, especially around Kingston, I think a lot of it is, it could be just a bit higher wall around the goalie, higher fence, some alternative water sources. Sometimes, people in these communities are stuck going to a water spout or something that is right near this goalie, So I think as much as we are, protecting the crocodiles, we need to protect the people first. And there's little infrastructure things like that can make a big difference to keep these people and stuff out of harm's way. So it is like fences, a bit higher walls, and and I think obviously more outreach material out there too. So again, as soon as people, if they see a croc or anything, they can call and we have a response team there quick.
All right. Thank you so much for responding. And so on the matter of what Treya mentioned about maybe increasing signage, and also Damien did speak to that in his presentation about encouraging people to erect signs, especially in recreational areas and so on. So there was a question to follow up on that, Damien. I find within my travels that I rarely see signs that let people know this is a croc areas or a hatchling area. Is it that members of the community take them down, or is it a funding issue? And I want to add another, to tack onto that question to see if we can tackle Damien. Even if they do put up the signs, especially in recreational areas, how much of a difference does that make? And would people who manage those recreational spaces be also concerned? Because even if the signs are there as a disclaimer, what does that mean for those areas that people use for leisure?
Okay, so the first question that was asked, so the first thing, there are many areas in Jamaica that have crocodiles. And signage are not put up in all of those places. However, in the main recreational areas, we try our best to get signs there. However, one of the problems that we have in putting up signage is that when you talk to the people, in the past, sometimes we have done stuff where we don't communicate properly with the people. So you have to go there and work with the community and explain why you're putting it there and let them feel a part of it. Then you can move to put in the signage. Because, for example, in recreational area, you have to understand, they feel when you put the signage there, I would not want to go and swim there because many people come there and not aware that they're crocs. And yes, that's it. On the other hand, I believe that if crocodile is in an area, it is our duty to inform everybody that is there and put in measures to first, as Joey mentioned before, to protect people, and the second also to protect the animals. In most places that we go, crocodiles do not like a noisy environment. And there's research and things that we can put in. And I'm very happy with the work that TRIA is doing. We need more research in some of these areas. And we're checking out what has been done in other countries. You can put in other measures there. Fencing, we're also looking at option now to put in barriers in the water to see if it could work in stopping the crocs from getting in some of these recreational areas. However, nothing is perfect. These animals are here for millions a year and they're pretty smart. So when you implement some measures, they will try, because just imagine somebody blocking you from your home. What would you try? You try another way to enter. So that's the same way the crocodile is thinking. But I do agree. Yes, and another thing is funding. Crocodile research need funding. And as Treya mentioned before, USAID gone. When you see Joy, Treya, and any one of us on our free time and weekend go out and go catch a crocodile, we're not being paid. We pay toll, we put in all of that. We're not asking for money or anything like that, but it's a sacrifice that we make because we feel that they are important.
Thank you so much, Damien, for that response. And so I'm gonna bring in Ricardo Miller, no, because somebody has asked for crocodiles who have died of natural causes and found dead, maybe through vehicular accident. Would it be illegal to harvest their skin and teeth for local craft?
Okay, thank you for that question. Yes, it is. It is illegal to have in one's possession part or the entire animal, whether it be the teeth, whether it be the skin, and so forth. Now, if someone is actually an entrepreneur and wants something like that, you will recall that in my presentation, there is an avenue for an exemption. So if they can build a valid argument and ask for an exemption to collect something, it might be possible. However, the law is sort of clear in terms of what are the main conditions under which an exemption is granted. Research, conservation, historical, educational purposes. So if they wanted to harvest it for more of an educational purpose as opposed to a commercial activity, that is something that would probably easier to get an exemption for. But at the moment, no, it is totally illegal to have the animal or part thereof. And when you think about it, it's going to be hard to prove where it came from. It can be an animal that somebody actually went out and harvested rather than a roadkill, as they say. So it's going to be hard. And so the law has to be clear on that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Miller. I was searching for another question that I saw was directed at you as well. So from the government's perspective, what was the outcome of the travesty at the sewage pond and what are the lessons learned?
Okay, all right. That's a very good question. In Joey's later slides, he showed the outcry from the public and the attention it garnered at very high level of government. The minister, the Honorable Matthew Samuda, called an emergency meeting on a Saturday, and we all showed up and we toured the area. And he said, listen, man, this is not going to occur again. We cannot let this happen again. And so the property is NWC, so NWC was a part of the meeting. And so he left direct instructions for us to work together to ensure it doesn't happen again. One of the first things we did, first and foremost, was to actually bury the bodies. So with NWC, we got heavy equipment. We dug a gravesite close by. We collected all the bodies. We actually removed the heads a few days before because we wanted to preserve those for educational purposes. Joey actually has all these skulls, which he can now use with his team at Hope Zoo to do educational programs once the skulls are cleaned up. So we buried them. And the next thing we did was we're in dialogue with NWC and their engineers because we're designing a ladder system to put along the edge of these rubberized slopes of the sewage ponds. In the event the water level drops again, the crocodiles will have an avenue in which they can come out. And actually, a couple of years ago, there was a similar case in the same area where the water levels were low, and we actually saw it. And we put in a makeshift ladder system, and the crocodiles came out. And so we know already that it's something that will work. But fast forward 2 years later, it's so unfortunate the situation occurred without we realizing at the time, and so we lost so many crocodiles. But we're actually working now to put together a more purpose-built ladder system along the margins of the sewage ponds to allow crocodiles to crawl out.
Thank you for that context. And I think hopefully for the person who would have asked the question about what collaborative initiatives have been put in place to prevent the repeat of this tragedy, your response and segments of Joey's presentation would have, answered that question. But somebody else did ask that, is there like an alert or monitoring system in place to alert authorities of the lowering water levels?
Okay, so that's the lessons learned section that I didn't actually answer. Okay. For the water level lowering is an abnormal activity because sewage ponds across the island are always filled with water. So it was very unusual to have lower water levels. And it was actually a more of a deliberate action because there was an issue. And so they actually turned off water to that section. And over the years, over many, many months, it slowly dried out without anyone knowing. So what is going to happen? What actually came out of that meeting with the minister is that we're now increasing our monitoring. We're having more boots on the ground 3 days per week. NWC is monitoring their sewage ponds, and we're in constant dialogue with them. And we here at NEP are actually visiting twice per month just to monitor the sewage ponds. There are other sewage ponds across the island that do have crocodiles, but we have no such issues. We constantly do crocodile sensitization work, and we have one scheduled for the NWC staff for the Greater Portmore sewage pond. This is sensitization, do's and don'ts when you're working in the space where crocodiles are, and they'll be better able to identify issues and, put into action and contact NEPA so we can respond. So that is really the lessons learned, and that's the way forward at the moment.
All right. So I'm going to switch the tempo a little bit because this question maybe could be like a pop quiz for our panelists. Somebody wants to know, what is the estimated population? What is Jamaica's estimated crocodile population? Who's the first to answer that question?
Sure, you're up.
Oh gosh, this question is always asked, and my answer is usually we're still figuring it out. The thing with the population surveys, the island-wide population surveys that we did, is that we still need more and more data for like a few more years to do some statistical modeling that can give us kind of an accurate estimation. From what we saw, we do have like density estimates across the island and like across all the habitats that we did survey, and it is really hard to say because we don't want to overestimate, we don't want to underestimate. But what we're seeing is the crocodile population seems to be stable, but there are declining numbers in certain areas. And these certain areas are more natural habitats where historically you would find a nice abundant sized population. So we're talking about a lot of our major rivers like Black River, Rio Cobre, Rio Minho, and Font Hill. And that's a cause for concern for many reasons. So I'm not going to give a number, but the population is definitely threatened, and there is more research that we need to do to get kind of a better idea in terms of a population estimate, amongst other factors.
Thanks, Rhea. Okay, Ricardo, I think you want to weigh in on this one as well.
Yes, Treya said it perfectly, but I wanted to add that, it's always challenging counting populations in the wild for obvious reasons. Animals are hiding, animals die, animals born. And, for species like crocodiles, they lay, 50 eggs, 60 eggs. There is a common saying in ecology that animals that lay or breed in large numbers tend to die in large numbers. So when they lay, 50, 60 eggs, only 1 or 2 may make it to adulthood to reproduce again. So yeah, exactly. So it's you go and you count and you see 100 crocodiles and 80 of them are hatchlings or just a year old. And as they grow, as time passes, that number is going to dwindle. So we really want to be looking at the numbers in terms of mature adults, adolescents, as well as hatchlings. And with the hatchlings being less important because their numbers are going to change drastically very quickly. So as Treya said, we can't really put a number on them, but we can confidently say that it's the adult population is less than 1,000, and I would actually say quite a lot less than 1,000. But I'll leave it vague as that and until the research comes in. And as Treya was saying again, it's not just counting numbers; it's actually modeling. You have to model, so you have to collect data on certain aspects, certain dynamics of the population, and then we put that into a statistical modeling program, and it gives us an estimate. So we're still a little ways from that because we actually need quite a bit more data.
Okay, thank you so much. So I know Damien had stressed and others that funding is needed for this work, but then on the flip side too, we live in a society where sometimes we also want to understand. While we do know that economics is not the only determinant of value, but a lot of times it helps people to understand the significance of things. And so there was a question that was asking, what are some potential economic benefits of crocodile conservation and how they can be leveraged to support conservation efforts? I don't know if you have a quick comment on that, Ricardo. Also, I can, well, anyone can answer, but also Joey, given your role as well at Hope Zoo.
I mean, since I'm on, I'll just go quickly before Joey. I mean, you're from Black River. We spoke about Black River, a community that, a lot of it is dependent on, the fact that they do safari tours with crocodiles. So ecotourism, for example, is a big deal. And it's something that still has potential. There is quite a few players along the Black River. There are other areas of the island where that could be developed. But also, having crocodile conservation in situ, meaning within a confined space, such as at an attraction or at the Hope Zoo, for example, also has its value. And I'll stop there and let Joey weigh in on this.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up the ecotourism. That's, one of the similar case Black River, but it's been in other countries around the world. One of the kind of best ways to protect these dangerous predators in these communities, especially heavy populated communities, is to put a monetary value on where the community, the people are benefiting from it. The people in Black River, they see the income, whether it's through people at their food shops, people at the markets, not just because they work at Black River, but those crocs bring people to that area where people come there, they spend the night, they spend money, and I think that's one of the biggest things is kind of putting, especially when you're in these, especially in poorer communities, is put a monetary value where people will want to keep those crocs around because they're benefiting of it. Like I say, yes, they're part of our Jamaican culture, and they're endangered species. But when it comes to some very tough instances, especially the people that are living with these animals, we have to work with them as well to kind of make sure they try to see that they're seeing some benefits out of this. And that way they'll want to keep these crocs around.
All right. Thank you so much, Joey. So we're still trying to round out some of these questions, but there was an interesting one from Yankee that says, also, is there any plans in place to preserve samples of the DNA of our endemic species for reanimation? Joey, if I could just stay with you on that one, unless somebody else has a burning comment, because, we recognize some of the parts of the crocodiles, have been reserved for education and other things. So I don't know.
Well, we preserve genetic samples for possible genetic studies down the road. There's always new studies evolving. There might be some research that comes along, that, for instance, a good example is that the American crocodile, which is found in Florida, throughout the Caribbean and Mexico and in Central America, even down to South America, literally just a couple months ago, a paper came out that found what used to be the American crocodile in Mexico is now there's actually 2 different species. And that's from doing this type of genetic work. And so Treya and Ricky, whenever we go out, and a lot of times, like I said earlier, when we're marking the crocs, either with the pit tag or if we clip the tail scutes, we save those tail scutes and preserve them in a special solution where if we ever need to do any genetic studies years down the road, we can look at those. But I'm not sure what he meant by the reanimation, or like, is that like, I guess if they go extinct, we can bring them back?
Yeah, maybe like, I don't know if it's in this era of virtual reality and AR and I don't know.
I think right now we just need to, I mean, we keep genetic samples for other reasons for studies, but right now we need to focus on keeping them here. I think,
Yes. Okay. Understood. There's so many other questions, but somebody has asked, and I know we're coming up on time, but Robert Houghton was and I do know there were other encouraging comments there saying about brilliant presentation, great insights. But Robert did say that this was an excellent presentation and maybe should be shown as well in communities that are crocodile prone or crocodile prone areas. And he had also asked if crocodiles at Holland Bay, for example, are tagged in any way to see year-to-year growth.
Yeah, so they're all just like in the one video I posted earlier. All those crocodiles, pretty much soon after they're born, even at the health screen, they get that microchip, they get that pit tag, where then they get that identification number, and that's their microchip for the rest of their life. And so we can track them, if they get released in the wild, and then 10 years from now they pop up in Portland. We can scan that number and be like, oh yeah, we caught this crocodile back in 2002, So that's what we do with all the crocodiles now. Whenever we catch a croc in Kingston or Bull Bay, if it's not marked yet, then it does. And because of that, we've actually got me, Treya, Leighton, we've actually got several recaptures where we've taken crocs, because it's pretty well proven that crocodile relocations don't work. It's not an effective kind of conservation tool, So when this croc pops up, let's say in Seaview Gardens, if we take that croc, we can drive it, 50 kilometers away and put it somewhere else, closer to St. Thomas or something. Those crocs, it's kind of a mystery, but it's almost like a bird migratory thing. They have a very strong homing mechanism where they just want to go right back to where they came from. And so, we've taken crocs, just a couple months ago, Damien and I took a croc from Hellshire. We put it in a car for 2 hours. We drove it to Salt River. We put it on a boat for an hour. Released it out by Goat Island. 2 weeks later, that croc was back in the pond we caught it from. And so that's why for sustainable conservation, relocation is not the best. It's coexistent education and getting in these communities. And I think, if Treya has I think part of the question was, some of Treya's work with the Jam Croc Initiative moving forward is, these outreach kind of workshop groups and getting into these communities in these croc populated areas is going to be some of the most critical work. And not only educating those people, but showing that they have support, that people are there to help them if they do have conflicts, So that's what needs to happen, and it's going to be pretty cool over the next few years.
Okay. Thank you so much, Joey. And on that note, we're going to just bring things to a close. But I'm going to encourage all my speakers, you feel free to visit the chat, as we know that we've been streaming across several platforms. And so if there's any questions that we may have missed, I'm sure that the commenters will appreciate the response. And like I said, it will also benefit those of whom will be catching this recording at a later date. But let me just again officially say thank you to all our speakers, Ricardo Miller, Joey Brown, Damon White, and Treya Picking, for your eye-opening and enriching and insightful presentations today. I know that this event started from us responding to a tragedy, but I think at the end of the day, we're moving towards transformation. If by anything that we've seen with the depth and scope of work that you all have been engaged in individually and collaboratively. And so we do know that saving the crocodiles is much more than protecting species. It's about protecting the balance in our ecosystem. It's about protecting the heritage in our culture. And also it's also about protecting or ensuring accountability within our stewardship. So we're really encouraged by all that you have tabled here today. And I know that more people will be following Jamcroc Initiative, more people will be following Roosters World Jamaica, more people will be tracking and calling NEPA, and also more people will be calling and visiting Hope Zoo, wanting to learn more and how they can build capacity as it relates to conservation. So it was a pleasure engaging. It was a pleasure serving as your moderator. I am Dana Lynn Swaby, and I do encourage you to share this link widely, or links widely, wherever you got this recording. So on behalf of the Faculty of Science and Technology at the University of the West Indies, Mona, we say bye and thank you so much.
Bye.